All right, we are live. What's going on, Johnny?
Live? Not much, Jordan. Just happy to be here, to be a part of your podcast. My first time being on the podcast, so I'm not aware of any etiquette involved. I do listen to a lot of podcasts myself, like Joe Rogan Experience and Paula Pants Afford Anything. So I kind of got an idea of how it usually goes. But this is my first video podcast, so I'll try not to do anything that would embarrass myself.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, greetings from the and welcome to Happy Dance's Guide to Revolution. It's great to have you on, and looking forward to getting into some things,
Same here. Yeah, I'm excited. Either way, my brother.
So before, I have a bunch of stuff set up for us. But before we get into that, I do have some housekeeping pieces to touch on. So first, I want to give a shout out to the most recent donor to the GoFundMe, which is my Uncle B. So shout out Uncle B. Thank
Uncle
you.
B.
Thank you, Uncle B. You're the man. And I was thinking about it, want to give him a shout out. I was trying to think like what I admire most about him. I think what I admire most about him is his sense of humor. He has a killer sense of humor, he's got a dark sense of humor like me too. Like he's not afraid to like laugh at like things that are kind of, a little edgy sometimes, and I appreciate that. But he also is serious too. Like he knows when it's time to be serious, and like he's a serious person overall, So shout out Uncle B, much love. And then the next piece that I want to touch on is, I talked a little bit about this. Kind of, I had some close two actually close family friends of mine pass away these past 2 weeks. It's terrible. Unrelated car accidents, and the one was one of my best friends, his mom, Kelly Rinaldi. She passed away in a car accident, and she was a really close friend with my mom, and like I knew her kind of growing up, and she was a great person and hilarious, and I got to be like a groomsman / best man at his wedding a couple years ago, and like it was great to kind of spend some time with her there. And actually, when I finished the trail, she showed up at the finish line with some people and like was there to greet me too. So that's the last time I saw her, So
yeah,
it's a shame, This thing's precious. This little thing we have called life, Terrible.
Yeah, sorry to hear that, man. Yeah, wow.
And then even more recently, and this is the one I was talking to you about, is another family friend of mine, Jake Bush. He passed away in a car accident. He was only 19 years old, man. He had so much like life ahead of him, and like, he and I weren't like super close. I was like 10 years older than him practically, but like whenever we had like 4th of July parties at the house growing up, like he was always my little buddy, like playing basketball, like throwing the football around, like hanging out, and like just a good dude. And it's like, my heart breaks for like his mom, I know she's probably like wishing she was dead right now, sort of, and it's just kind of brutal,
Yeah, day 19. That's so young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little brother. He's about 10 years younger than me, and just to imagine me ever losing him would just be devastating. Like I can't even. Like he's in the army now, and he's off in Germany. Fortunately, he's not on the front lines or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's wow. No, wow, yeah.
It's this precious thing we have here, and it's like it doesn't always end like how you think it's going to end. Sometimes people get bounced early, and it's kind of rough on the people around them. But
yeah,
you got to keep playing to win.
Especially when it comes to car accidents. Oh man, I always get a little bit scared when I go into the car and I have to do like a long drive. Like when I go to Houston to visit family, it's a 6-hour drive, and it's just like it's a long time to be in the car and on the highway, and it's scary, especially how integrated cars are, and in everyday life in the U.S. at least, it's just like the possibility of it happening is greater than a lot of other things that could happen, I guess. Yeah.
And it's so unpredictable too. It's like you're out for a little joyride, or you're driving to work, or you're driving to the store, and like everything's fine and normal and regular, and then all of a sudden it's just over. It's like such like an unnatural way to go too. It's like we have these human flesh and blood bodies that are like they're pretty durable. Obviously, they're vulnerable, but they're pretty durable to a lot of different things, But when you combine like this flesh and blood body with like the speed and the steel, it's like just don't stand a chance,
Mm-hmm.
It's brutal.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is kind of a natural thing. When you phrase it like that, it's like, it's man. I'm just looking out the window and I see all these cars just driving by, and I'm like, yeah, we made that. It's crazy.
Yeah, and if you think about like human history, I mean, dying in like horrific car accidents is like a blink of the eye. It's like brand new, like usually like, young like us, we died. It was like we died like on some sort of hunt. There was like we got attacked, or like there was an accident hunting and we didn't make it, or we died in like a war, like defending our land and our territory and our whatever, and like certainly there's parts of that aren't good too, but like at least like justify it, make sense of it, that like, oh, they were doing what they thought was right, but it's like this is just like no sense in it at all. It's just like it's just over, so messed up.
Yeah, that's a good point. The immediacy of it, just like in the blink of an eye, like you said, is there's no like, you're just minding your own business and boom, you're gone. It's just kind of you're not fighting for anything. You're not standing up for something. You can't die a martyr or anything. You just die.
Yeah.
Precious thing called life.
Yeah. So that's that kind of wraps up the housekeeping pieces I wanted to touch on. So let's move on from the sadness. Sadness is suffering is part of life, but we're gonna try to have call me happy dance for nothing. I try to keep it light, keep it fun. So but also acknowledging kind of the tragedy of life sometimes is a lot to bear. So,
real quick, but you're okay though, right? You're doing well. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good. It's I've been through family losses, so I know like how bad it can be, especially when they're like really close to a person. So like when something like this happens, mostly I feel for the people that are around them. Mostly, like I think about like mom, and I'm just like, bro, like, that's where my heart really goes.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the ways I like to kind of start these podcasts is like talking about how we met. So that goes back, I believe, to UCSD Engineers for a Sustainable World Conference, I think, unless you were at the one in Buffalo too, which I'm not sure if you were, but I'm pretty sure we met in San Diego. But were you at the one in Buffalo too?
I was the one in Buffalo, yeah. I was in the one in Buffalo where it was the banquet was inside of a dam, I believe. It was, or a hydroelectric plant.
Yeah, Niagara Falls power plant.
Yeah.
Plant.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was there.
Dude.
But I don't think, I'm not quite sure when we met.
So we must have met there, but I don't think like we actually started like talking as much until the following year when we saw each other again, like must have recognized each other. And I remember you were like doing some ESW raps, and I was like, this kid's cool. I was like, this kid knows what's up. So I remember you there, and that was a lot of fun. And I think that Buffalo was probably spring of 2011, and I think UCSD was, it must have been fall of 2011, and then UCSD must have been spring of 2013. So we go back like eight years almost.
Years. Wow, that's quite a ways, man. That's quite, wow. It seems so long ago.
Yeah.
To be honest, the only thing I remember from UCSD was that we had showed up on the weekend was cloudy. It wasn't sunny at all. And then I just remember the very end of the conference when after the banquet, did you go out to the beach afterwards? Afterwards, everyone went out to the beach.
The beach party was so much fun. And we didn't get in any trouble, but there was trouble associated with it. But I didn't care. It was one of my most fun nights of my life.
Yeah, same here. I had a blast, and I distinctly remember that night because I had a flight early next morning, and that was the first time. And the last time, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna drink, have a good time, not go to bed, and just hop on my flight and just go on home the next, right in the morning.
Yeah.
Terrible idea. I ended up on the plane with a huge hangover, just feeling like I wanted everything to just like stop already, and I had two layovers because it was a cheap flight, but I just had to do a lot of transfers, and I almost missed one of the flights because I fell asleep just from the fatigue and the drunkenness, and Luckily I set an alarm, but I barely heard the alarm to go make my flight. So I just remember that weekend because I was like, I'm never doing that again.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a bunch of 19, 20, 22-year-old engineering students from all over the country, and you put them in one spot, and you let them. Well, you don't let them, but they arrange their little beach party for themselves, and it's bound to have some trouble associated with it,
I remember the last time we hung out back in San Francisco. No, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, yeah.
Los Angeles.
I forget what else we did.
Sushi. We went around Asia Town, Koreatown.
I think we were in Little Tokyo.
Little Tokyo. Yeah, I remember that you had said that you quit drinking. Are you still? Have you ever since then you haven't drank at all?
Well, I would say for the most part, and it's like I didn't quit drinking necessarily because I was like an alcoholic or anything. I just kind of quit because I felt like I was just doing it too much, and I was kind of getting fat, and like it's kind of losing. Seriously though, because I was drinking IPAs. Like IPAs are my jam. And like if I do drink now, it's IPAs, but they're like heavy. It's like I don't know how many calories in them, but it's probably like 300 or something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So you drink 4 of those, and it's like you're gonna get fat. So. I don't really drink, but like occasionally I'll have an IPA. If I'm really pushing it, I'll have 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it. I don't drink anything else. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Beers I don't find like tasty, and like alcohol tastes like poison, like real alcohol, like liquor. I mean, it kind of tastes gross to me. But
yeah, no, I know what you mean. These days I'm drinking more wines, just like here and there, just because it doesn't make it feel so heavy in my stomach. I don't feel fat from drinking it. Like the bloatedness of it. And then I just been drinking like scotches or whiskeys every now and again, just like on the rocks, something fancy, just kind of every now and again, just when I want to like take the edge off, or like a Friday,
Yeah.
Because these days it's like there's not, as someone who's self-employed, the weekend and the weekdays are very similar. So kind of that taking that drink, kind of like, okay, Johnny, it's time to relax a little bit, and enjoy yourself. No need to work 7 days a week nonstop. So that's how I approach alcohol these days. So
that's good. It's all about your relationship with things. If it's like, if it feels like it's getting out of control, it probably is. If you feel like you kind of have an image and it's something that you enjoy doing and not like something that enjoys doing you,
That's true. Yeah. Are you still involved with the ESW on any level?
No, but I did attend the digital conference they had in April.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't have a real conference because of the COVID situation, so they had a digital conference, and I attended that. It was pretty cool. It was good to kind of remind myself of that world of making presentations and talking to people and stuff. And I do want to get back into something like that someday. It definitely filled its void. Filled the role for me when it did. And actually, that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about is I had Mike Alcazarin on the show, episode 8 with Mike and I, and we talked a lot about ESW and kind of gushed over like our love for Engineers for a Sustainable World and like how much we enjoyed being part of it and like how much joy it brought us, and like the friends we made. And I assume that you feel pretty similarly about that experience, right? Or what?
Yeah, definitely. ESW, same for me. I was at a point before I joined the national team again, where you were the development director. At that point in my life, I was feeling kind of like, okay, I'm a professional, I'm working now, but like, there's something that I'm missing. And so when I got wrapped up in ESW again during that time period, it felt great because I knew you, I knew Derek, I knew Mike, I knew other people who were in the club, some people who I had met, I made friends with, and it was great. It kind of filled that void, and then things just got really busy for me as I got really involved with ESW for 3 years in total, and then I had moved to Oklahoma at that time, and then my plate just got really full because I was navigating a completely new environment from like rural town to from a big city to a rural town, and so I stepped away from ESW. But when I was a part of it, it was great. I really enjoyed the people that I worked with, and I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about where they're headed now, the organization, but I still keep tabs on it because ESW is near and dear to my heart. It's where I first developed my passion for sustainability, and you just can't forget your roots, And out of it, I got to meet great people, and like you, for example, we're talking and catching up, and it's just yeah, ESW. I'll never forget for sure.
ESW for life, brother.
ESW for life. Yeah.
And I was thinking about the one retreat that we went to in Chicagoland or somewhere.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the bunks and like not quite a cabin, but like sort of like a new agey cabin thing, And I was laughing because I was like looking at some old pictures, and I came across the one where we each like wrote team on our back. We were being like, I wrote team on your back, and you wrote team on my back because we're like, yo, we're putting the team on our back, dog. We gonna raise this money. We were like so goofy, But like it was all good, trying to hype ourselves up and like get motivated and like get into it. But
yeah. I remember Alex Dale, like he was like, see, this is what I'm kind of worried about, y'all being too macho-ish or something like that. I forgot, he had made a statement about us like broing too hard, maybe, and I just thought it was really hilarious because we looked pretty funny thinking about the picture now.
Yeah.
But
it is probably a little douchey, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, I'm glad you said it because I was kind of thinking it, but I was like, no, I'm not going to say that.
That's probably not the appropriate word, but you know what I'm saying. It's like people are like, these guys over here.
These guys, yeah, exactly.
Well, whatever. It's like you got to get excited about something. We were excited and it was funny and we're trying to have a good time. It's like we're not slaves there. It's not like we got to be miserable or like take everything too seriously.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It was, as a volunteer, it was great to do, but whenever the work started to become like when I started to recognize how much work needed to go in to make it better, and the lack of resources that I had, and it was really hard to make it stay as a volunteering role. So, I didn't go to the digital conference this year, but I did see it. And I saw a lot of familiar names. Did you give a presentation there, or were you an attendee, or what was your role?
An attendee. I was just an attendee. The thing that jumps out to me the most was actually pretty cool. This guy kind of gave a presentation on. Let me try if I can sum it up. Basically, he showed like a graph of like energy use per GDP.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of see like this pretty linear line, and then like about 1970 it kind of curves down a little bit, and then he starts showing like similar graphs, like similar ideas worth of graphs for like animals and like the animal kingdom, so you have like energy use per kilogram of body mass, and like ultimately he shows this trend that like the bigger the animal gets, the more efficient it has to be. Like an elephant is actually way more efficient in terms of its energy usage than like than a mouse or a rat, than a rodent, which is pretty interesting. So you can kind of extrapolate that to the economy. At least this is what he was doing in his book, with like in order for the economy to grow, it needs to get more efficient, or maybe vice versa. Like efficiency is required for growth. Pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. I liked it.
Okay. Do you happen to remember the name of that book?
I have it written down in my notes here somewhere, but I don't. I can link it to you later though. It might have been called. Shit, I'm gonna get it wrong, but I can't remember.
That's cool. Yeah, as long as I'd be really interested to read that book. It sounds like a really interesting parallel between efficiencies, applying that to the economy.
Yeah, I wish I had a Jamie like Joe Rogan has Jamie. Look that shit up, Jamie. Tell me what that book's called, Jamie. I can't remember.
Yeah, he does too.
Maybe someday I'll get a Jamie.
Yeah, a Jamie. Yeah. But, yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit here, I want to talk about your hot sauce. I want to talk about, is it Batsanas?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's
So I
exactly
want
right.
to hear all about it. I want to hear kind of what inspired you to do that and kind of like what your process was. So like, talk me through that a little bit.
So one of my cherished memories as a child was eating boiled crabs with my mom and my little sister on the floor of our small kitchen in our small apartment. And when I became a professional, I had my own kitchen. I want to make some boiled crabs. I want to kind of relive that experience like my way this time. So I boiled up some crabs, and I was eating it. I was like, man, this is not good. I'm missing something.
Yeah.
And so I found out that I was missing two key components for that meal. It was the sauce itself, which what Silence is based on, and then the people to share it with. And that gave me the inspiration. Like, man, I would really love to make this. If I'm feeling this way, I'm sure plenty of other people want to feel this way. It was a sense of a joy, and I was like, I want to spread this joy with other people.
Yeah.
But that was it. It took a few years though for me to finally make that jump. And the catalyst was whenever I relocated to Oklahoma, and I got the chance to really like pull my way away from these distractions and my way of life in Houston to focus more on myself. And it was at that point I also realized, it's been 5 years. I'm not where I thought I would be in my professional career. I want to do something with sustainability, but for the past 5 years, I didn't have any inkling of how that was going to fit into renewable energy, for example. So I decided I needed to change careers, and I thought business would be the best route to go about it. And so the plan was to do engineering a little bit more, save up some money. Cost of living in Oklahoma is way cheaper than Houston, Texas, and then go get an MBA. But then while I was alone in a small apartment in small town Oklahoma, I was like, I'm gonna try making this sauce. I had this idea just kind of marinating in my mind for a couple of years, and I was like, I'm gonna start doing this. So I started. It took me about 6 months to turn the recipe that my mom had showed me to turn that into something that was feasible. That was a MVP, minimal viable product, and I instead of starting off at selling it at a farmer's market, I thought, what, I'm gonna sell it at a festival because I knew of a festival that was in Texas, in Houston, that people would go to, and I was thinking, what, I'm gonna go hard or go home. So I made a bunch of hot sauce, like 10 cases, the weekend before the actual event, and I already sank a lot of money into preparing for this event. So fortunately, I got all the paperwork and the regulations done the week before the event, showed up to the events in Houston, Texas, and then sold out. And when I sold out on that Sunday, I said to myself, this is it. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this full time. And then on Monday, I went to my boss. I was like, hey, I'm leaving. And it was like, I never felt happier, because I had some direction, gaining business experience, making something that I know would be successful based on the feedback I received from the festival, and then it just kind of grew from there. Being a part of ESW, I always, at various points of its stages, I learned a lot about vision and mission, but none of it really like sank in with me until I started this business. And then I was like, oh my God, we need a vision and a mission, and that's when it all just kind of came together.
So I want to back up to like the taste and the flavor and like actually coming up with the recipe. So obviously you don't want to give away your secret sauce, but like, so you had like this like sort of vision of what it was supposed to taste like from like childhood and like having this cooking with your mom or whatever. And then you kind of like experimented with some different iterations to try to like land on that specific one. And then how did you know like when you finally found it,
Oh man, I can't explain it, but it was like magic. It was like almost destiny. It was because I had created multiple iterations, right? And so basically, I go to my mom. I want to make this into a sauce. Show me how to make it. And moms, they just, oh, you need this much of this and this much of that. They don't measure it. They don't weigh anything. And I'm like, okay, well, I know right?
Yeah.
So I knew what the ingredients were, and I just needed to figure out the taste. And after putting a little more of this, less of this, smelling it, tasting it, I had like a little rubric I was using to evaluate the spiciness because I didn't want it to be too spicy, but it needed to be spicy enough. So I want to be faithful to the recipe itself.
Right.
And one day I created it and I tried it and I was like, this is it. This is it. Like, this is the recipe. And I wrote it all down and then, yeah. So to answer your question, it was just, I just knew like the kind of like the feeling I got from when I tried it was an indication of what, like, it told me, this is it, Johnny, you got it, you know?
That's all.
Yeah. It wasn't like, as an engineer, you try to go about it like methodically, with a method. But this is just like, I just knew. Yeah. Methodically.
Did you get your mom to try it too? And what did she think of it?
She loved it. She loved it. I had my whole family try it. So the sauce itself is based on a Laotian recipe. And so I made a bunch and I gave it to my family and I got their feedback. I gave them like these surveys to fill out that, so they were anonymous. And it was like, one response was, it tastes just like how I make it. And I was like, yes, awesome. Perfect.
That's awesome. So you go to this festival and you kind of home run there and you decide to kind of throw yourself into this fully and leave your job. And like, how's it been going since then? How's like the marketing efforts going? Are you kind of doing pretty good with it? I bought some the other day, and thanks for helping me with the address thing I screwed up. So I appreciate that. But I'm looking forward to trying it, man. It should be here in a day or two, I guess. And gonna have to throw it on some. And you said it's best on shellfish and like crabs and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes best with seafood, especially shellfish. I love it as a dip for crawfish tails, but I've also used it on raw oysters on the half shell. Amazing. And recently, my girlfriend and I, we've been experimenting with starches and cheese recipes like mac and cheese. And yesterday we made this thing called potato galette, which is like basically a hash brown, but there's like some cheese in the middle, and then there's cheese, and then there's some cheese on top, and it's made like a pizza or something. And we had it with that, and it was amazing. So,
man, I'm getting hungry just thinking about
it. Yeah, same here.
Reminds me of the trail, man. Like when we hiked the trail, we talked about everything you can think of because you had time all day and like no distractions, so you can just like dive into like any topic you want as deep as you can go. Except for food. I like every time we talk about food, I'm like, we gotta stop. I'm way too hungry for this shit right now. Like we can't be doing this. I'm losing it out here eating ramen and it was too much for me to handle.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Yeah. So tell people where they can get it. Tell like what the website is or whatever, how to order it, the whole deal.
Okay. So the website is www.vatsanas.com. That's VATSANAS.com. And we offer free shipping if you're in Oklahoma City or in Houston, Texas. And this will be best if, allergen warning, it does have anchovy in it. So if you're allergic to anchovies, I'm sorry, the sauce is not for you. However, if you're adventurous and you believe that every meal you have is a journey, then Vatsana is the perfect companion for your journey.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Yeah, and I'll make sure to include like the link in the video description as well, so people can go directly there too. So I was on your website and I came across the part where you talk about the mythology of the sauce. Tell people about that because I love that part.
Oh yeah. Okay. So there's a river that borders the west side of Laos. Between Laos and Thailand. The river it's called the Mekong River, right? And the Laotian mythology is that a sea serpent called the Phaya Naga lives in that river, right? And the Phaya Naga is known as the protector of Laos, the protector of Vientiane. It's a big symbol. If you go to like a lot of Buddhist temples in Laos, you'll see like the railings will be like the sea serpent of it. Let me go get a. I'll be right back.
All right. Got some visual aids coming in. This will be good.
All right. So I got a bottle of Sanas right here, and this is what the fire naga looks like. You may have seen this before. It's a sea serpent that lives in the river, the Mekong River. So the fire naga is a sea serpent that feasts on the fish of the Mekong River in Laos. It tosses its meal in the air and seasons it to perfection with its fiery breath before swallowing it whole. Lasana's seafood hot sauce is harnessed from that fiery breath and embraced by the adventurous seafood lover whose palate rejoices in finally finding a complementing sauce.
That's awesome. Love
Yeah.
it. I love it. I'm so excited to try it. And like the mythology piece was so cool. I was like, this is amazing. I love that he like built this into the story. It makes it seem like so much like, I don't know, it makes it seem older. Like it makes it seem like part of the culture more, by building it, like tying it in with the mythology. I love it,
Oh, I like that. I'm gonna have to write that down.
All right, do you know anything else about, what would you say, Laos mythology, or is there a different word for that, like Laotian mythology? I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, so what inspired me to weave the story into the hot sauce itself is that I forget when, it's probably, I think it's in like September or October. There's this phenomena called the Naga fireballs, and it's only in certain parts of Laos. But if you like stand on the shores of Laos, either Laos or Thailand, during this time period, you'll see these little red orbs just kind of rise from the Mekong River, and it's like a bunch of them. And a lot of people, there's a lot of debate on what it is. Some people say it's gases being released that get that float into the air, and other people say it's the fire naga itself just shooting fireballs out into the skies. But no one really knows what causes it. So that's the inspiration behind the story, was the naga fireballs.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
Dude, I love like the intersection of these things of like observations that people made over time, like natural observations, combining with like trying to like explain them when you don't fully understand them, and like building it into a story in order to like understand it. Like you just make a story about it in order to explain it, and like how like science kind of ruins some of those things in a way, but like obviously you need science to explain what's actually happening and why. But like it's so separate from like the way humans, I think about things with stories and like personifying things, I think it's pretty cool how it all kind of intertwines itself,
Yeah, I agree. I think the story of a mythical sea serpent shooting fireballs in the air is way more interesting than gas is rising from the riverbed. It just paints a better picture.
Yeah.
Which is a cool thing I learned. So with Fire Naga Foods, we just started off in September of last year, and we had big plans this year to do a lot of. We had big plans this year to go to a lot of hot sauce events, a lot of seafood festivals, and spread the word, because festivals are our biggest source of income and in marketing. However, due to the pandemic, all those things were either canceled or postponed, which had a huge impact on our projected cash flow. Like basically nothing, Farmer markets were canceled, events. Yeah, it's just so it's like, what do we do now? Fortunately, this past weekend, I participated in this thing called the Small Business School Challenge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a 48-hour it's a 48-hour virtual accelerated workshop that brought together like 150 small businesses across the nation and like 470 something MBA students. And basically, each small business was given a team of 3 MBA students to help strategize, to help build a strategy to help the small business be in a position of success when the dust settles. And one of the cool things I learned was the art of storytelling, how to tell a story. And the guy, his name is Professor David Weimer from Haas School of Business. He one of the lines he says was that you can't tell a good story if there isn't a good story to tell. And he uses Coco, the Disney movie Coco, as like an example of what kind of key things a good story should have, like the characters, what's the motivation, conflict, what's the problem, how does it get resolved, and then there are symbols that kind of help we like bring it all together. And just that what we talked about, the how sciences can kind of ruin things for us, but then the mythological side, the story side of it is just it captures more. It's more enthralling than just having facts laid out.
Right.
And that reminded me of the David Weimer explaining the traits of a good story.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we our whole like understanding is a narrative structure. Like we are our own main character in our life story, and like everybody that we come in contact with is like a character in our story, and we look at stories like, and even like the best stories do a great job of building like the characters to like the nth degree. The best characters, like the ultimate characters, someone who, like an example I like to use is like Captain America and like Iron Man. They're great characters, and one of the reasons is like Captain America is obsessed with doing the right thing. Like he wants to do the right thing. That's like what drives his character, doing the right thing. Well, meanwhile, like Iron Man's character is obsessed with doing the thing right. And it's not the same thing. Like they're driven by different like understandings of the world, or like goals for what they want the world to be, or like what they think should be right in the world, and it leads to so much conflict. Even though they're both like good guys in the story, they're also like adversaries in like half of the movies, because they're driven by different things,
Yeah, that they did a really good job of portraying those two different mindsets in those movies. It was like in Civil War. Wow, that was amazing film that really showed how they just couldn't work together. There was just a clashing of thought between what each respective person believed in.
Mm-hmm. And it mirrors very well with like the modern political debate, and probably the ongoing political debate for forever, is like individual versus social. What's more important? Like is the rights of the individual the most important thing, which is like what Captain America kind of says, or like is doing what's best for society the ultimate good, And like really there's no right answer necessarily. It's like it depends on the specifics, right? You have to like look at the details and determine what's the appropriate balance for this, and that's why political dialogue exists, so they can have those difficult conversations,
Yeah, I feel yeah. It's such a good. It's like, yeah, man. It's just so like. I think the meaning of life is to help to do what will help push humanity forward, and I think the important that is accomplished, and each individual that's a part of the overall humanity plays an important role. We're all linked together in this long chain of humanity, and I think that we are working towards something that, even though we don't know what it is at the end of it, our individual being guided by our individual, by our values to help humanity is the best way to approach it.
Totally. Exactly right. And I think what you're describing there is like, in my opinion, like the essence of faith. When you talk about like religious faith, for example, it's like exactly what you're talking about. There's no way you can actually know like that whatever I'm about to do is going to lead to the best outcome, but you just kind of have to like have faith that like as long as what I'm doing is like good and true and like based in love, then I almost have to have faith that it's going to lead to the best outcome, because you can't ever really fully know. It's almost like you have to take that leap of faith and just base your actions off that belief, sort of,
Yeah, and I feel like it's a very difficult concept to grasp, And I can understand why it could escape a lot of people, especially in this like day and age where I feel like personally, I feel like distractions are just bountiful. They're ubiquitous, you know. And I find myself struggling to stay mindful about my life and not getting too uh, sidetracked by Netflix or movies or things that just kind of take away from that, you know. And um, it's hard to have like a deeper understanding and yet not be able to explain it to everyone, you know, because it's like everyone moves at their own pace, you know, and you can't rush someone with your own timeline, you know, like
Right.
it just doesn't resonate, you know. Like I didn't really, for example, I didn't start, reading a lot of books until a few years ago. And before that, you couldn't convince me to pick one up and just to read it because you say it's good, you know. I just kind of had to figure it out for myself, and then I started on this path, and then it's like a friend of mine told me this. He said, as you grow more intellectually and spiritually, you realize you'll feel more and more alone. And I get where he's coming from, you know, and it's like you want to help everyone and you want humanity to go this way, but it's like this fundamental understanding that a lot of people don't have yet that you can't just always speak to.
Totally. I totally get what you're saying, you know? And like one example I think where that plays out is like, you ever talk to somebody who's doing like PhD research?
Not very often, no.
Doing like a PhD thesis on something like super specific, you know?
Yeah.
And like you're like, ask them, so what's your PhD on? And they start talking, and you're like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Like I have a technical background. Like I caught like the first two sentences, and from there forward, just like whoo, right over my head. Like I have no idea what you're talking about. You know? But it's like they're entrenched in that world. Like they're deep into it. You know, they're trying to solve like a really specific piece of this like complex problem. You know, so it's like, yeah, of course I'm not gonna understand. Like I only like. It kind of reminds me of fractals too. Are you familiar with fractals at all?
Somewhat familiar, but go ahead.
It's this geometric pattern that occurs in nature based off the golden ratio, you know.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
So it's like kind of like the spiral, but it's also
Yeah.
like based on the Fibonacci numbers too, you know. And it's kind of like, so like if I'm looking at you through my like golden ratio rectangle here, you know, and this is like Johnny, like how I know Johnny, you know. This is only like the first surface level of Johnny, you know. Like I can zoom in and now I'm at like a complete different layer of the fractal. And like, it's like, whoa, there's all these things about Johnny that I didn't even know about, you know, and there's like these really good, interesting things. And there's some of these bad, like some of these darker things. And it's like, he's actually way more complicated than I ever thought. And then you could even go like further and you're like 6 layers deep in the fractal. It's like, holy shit. Like this is all like Johnny's like this, like what is like, it just gets more and more complicated the further you dig down deep, you know? Cause like at first it's only like this snapshot. You can only like, get so much at one time, but like the more you dig, the more kind of questions reveal themselves, you know, the more it opens up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Still you. Like it's all still Johnny. Like the more you dig, like it's never not Johnny, you know, but it's a different part of Johnny that you can't even see from out here, sort of, you know. Weird.
Okay. And that's definitely, that's a good way to explain it. It's like when you look into who a person is and you dig deep, it's like you see another box, and then you can go dig deeper into that, and that box it doesn't change, but you can always go in deeper, no matter what, right? It's like you never get to zero, but you approach zero. Is that what it's like?
Exactly.
Fractals?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I even have a hard time looking into myself like that, you know?
Totally.
You know, it's yeah, it's a fundamental question that I find myself asking myself a lot. Like, and it's like, who am I? You know, what defines a person? And then I go into deeper, like, how did I get to who I am today? And then how do people see me? And it's just like all these, just drilling down more and more, you know, and kind of understanding who I am is just tough in itself. And I think that everyone should dedicate part of their life to understanding who they are
Totally.
because I think it leads to a lot of because when you don't, I think it leads to a lot of problems,
Totally.
mental problems, and things like that.
Yeah. And you're so complicated as a person, like any person really, that you can never like fully describe the person, right? You can only like create like a map or like a model of the person, even yourself. Like you have like this conceptual understanding of who you are, but even that is like limited. You know, it still doesn't like fully address who you are. You know, it's only like, well, if I were to try to describe it to somebody, this is what it would look like. You know, but it's like it doesn't really. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's never full. You can never fully do it because it's too complicated. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so let's shift gears here a little bit. I want to talk about, this is kind of a question I try to ask everybody on the podcast, and we're going to kind of transition this into the individual, kind of like we were talking about before, so the social versus the individual. So we're going to kind of transition it. But kind of the question I want to ask is, what major changes would you like to see to our political system? Because what inspired this podcast in the first place was kind of a recognition that our political system needs, at least in my estimation, needs kind of an upgrade, needs some changes, but that's going to require some like imagination, you know, to imagine what it could be like. So, you know, obviously it's pretty rigid and structured, but like imagine for a second that it's like not, and you have some creative control over how the political system might be structured. Like, what would it look like? How would it function? You know, what would it do differently than it does now? Do you have any thoughts on that? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but
Yeah. So one of my values is knowledge, and I feel like that despite our common belief that we are rational human beings, we tend to succumb to our feelings and our emotions. Uh, if we could take a more objective approach to tackling various issues using data to support it, I think we'd be in a lot better situation. You know, I think that understanding the base rates of disasters and the economy, and just like knowing, having a better grasp of what the numbers are would lead us a longer way into where we could be. Um, yeah, yeah, and that's just the engineer in me talking. You know, having a more scientific approach
kind
to
of what
dealing
you're
with these
saying,
problems.
taking some of the I don't want to say like personality, but some of like the bias out of the analysis, sort of like how do we make decisions that are data driven rather
Mm-hmm.
than influenced by biases or influenced by greed or influenced by belief systems, whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? Not an easy question to answer, but I think it would probably be a good direction to work towards, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's so tough. It's like I'm reading this book right now. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and he talks about the how there are generally two systems in our mind. You know, there's a fast thinking brain and a slow thinking brain. System one and there's system two. There's the ones that are deeply ingrained in our brainstem. You know, the one that can read the expressions on people's faces, the one that causes us to react a certain way. It's our biologically driven part of our mind. And there's a more recently developed brain, which is the slower brain, the one that, you know, creates thoughts and is more rational. You know, and just the fact, like knowing that we're driven by that fast thinking brain, the one that's responding to emotions, makes it makes me feel that if we could really be the rational creatures that we believe we are, I think we'd be in a better situation. But just because of our system one, it's overcoming these biases and these heuristics is very difficult, and it's hard to avoid. I mean, you know, in the world, to be objective, you'd have to put aside, you know, your feelings and your ego. I mean, a lot of us have really fragile egos, you know, and we don't want to hurt ourselves, or if something happens and it hurts our ego, we get mad and we react, we lash out.
Right.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that because, you know, I'm familiar with how we as just people are achieving that data-driven kind of government is really hard to approach, you know, and yeah.
It's weird, the comparison that's kind of coming to mind here, and I don't know if like this is a fair comparison, but I'm almost thinking about the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
The stock market, like no one controls the stock market, like the market controls the market, you know?
Yeah, true.
And I wonder if there's a way to run government in a similar way where rather than like someone making all the rules, like everything makes all the rules, you know? I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm kind of making that up on the fly, but and I think this is like what you're getting at is I think part of the theme too of this podcast is like how do we use technology to upgrade democracy? Because that's really what I want to do. Like I see that it's like a little bit outdated. There's some things that we can do now that we weren't able to do a couple hundred years ago or even 50 years ago, you know? So how do we use all this powerful technology to improve our democracy? Like kind of what you're getting at is like, yeah, we have to use the data. We have to figure out a way to like analyze the data and take the human factor out of it, you know? But then like you kind of progress down that road a little further and it gets a little bit sci-fi, like dystopian future. Like what are we just gonna like have the robots like control everything? You know, like it can get weird pretty quick, you know? They're calculated, you know, they're gonna make the decision for based on whatever their programming is, you know? But is that what we want to do either? You know, there's some dangers in that as well.
I think that if there's some kind of algorithm that we can create that would help improve our lifestyle, I think I can understand some people fear that you know just following an algorithm is emotionless and it's not human. But I think if an algorithm can improve our democracy, our political system by even 1%, it's worth considering. You know, and I think that if we could, I think it'd be a partnership between technology and the people who make it. You know, I mean, sure, there's a downside to technology where you have where it can make things worse. But then I think if you if you combine that with humans that interact with it, I think that we could create something better. I don't remember the specifics, but I remember listening to the strongest computer. I forgot what it was called, Alpha something or Sky something, and it beat the best chess player. It learned how to beat the best chess player on its own, and then learned mahjong, I think, in a day, and then beat the best mahjong computer in a day. And the only thing that beat the AI, was a combination of computers and people were able to solve a problem faster than it. And that's where I get to thinking, you know, it's a relationship that I think that will between those two that will help us achieve a better life.
I agree 100% that like I don't think that like the computers and the robots are going to take over. I think we're going to slowly merge with them to where like it's almost indistinguishable which is which anymore, you know, like similarly with we have our phones now, like everybody's got their phone, like it's always right there and it's like you're almost half interfaced with the computer half the day anyway, you know. And I think the word you used before I think is really interesting, like the algorithm, right? Because we already run an algorithm, right? It's like it's an imperfect algorithm, but it's an algorithm. Like you're driving a car, right, and the light's red, so you stop, you know. It's like that's part of the algorithm, right? It's like that's the rules that you're following, you know. I'm like, sure, you can blow through it. You can not even notice it and blow through it, you know, or you can, whatever. You know, there's lots of ways to break it. But like merging this like artificial intelligence assistance with our own like kind of rational decision making, like could lead to a very powerful, like you said, something that can beat the best chess players and the best computer chess players at the same time, you know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you think is how would you do it? Like, I guess answering your own question, like, what do you think is it, like, if you can imagine anything the way, if you can imagine a different political system, how would it look like?
Yes. Um, I think building off your point, I think it needs to be data driven. I think we need to get experts in active decision making roles rather than in kind of eliminating some of these what I call general purpose politicians. I think we have too many general purpose politicians, and we don't have enough experts. Like a lot of these folks are like lawyers or business folks or whatever, and that's fine. There's places for that, but like I want like a real climate scientist, for example, like in the room with a vote. I want like a teacher with 30 years of experience, like in the room with a vote. I want a doctor who's like spent their whole career like saving people's lives and like doing that whole deal, like in there making the decision. So like trying to strip away some of the power held by those general purpose politicians and kind of giving it to experts is kind of something that I think could be very beneficial.
I like that. And would it be each of these professionals by state, or would it be, how would you account for
Yeah.
like populations and things like that?
Sure. So the kind of like the more specific idea here, and I've talked about this like once or twice in the podcast, but I don't mind kind of going over it again because I do think it's interesting, and it definitely has some flaws to it. But kind of here's kind of what I have in mind. So you have the House, right, and you have the Senate, and they're kind of parallel legislative bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would make the argument that the Senate is a duplication of the House in that it gives representation based off locale, but it's actually a less desirable version of it because it doesn't represent people mathematically based off population. Instead, it represents people based off their state. So everyone gets 2 per state, even though California has however many 40 million or something people. And Wyoming has like 400,000 or whatever the number is, but they each have 2 senators. I feel like that's not fair. I feel like we need to kind of replace the Senate. So keep the House as is, don't touch it. So you still have your like local representative that goes to Washington that represents your location, wherever that is, the 8th District of Pennsylvania or the 12th District of California or the 4th District of Texas or whatever. Keep all that. But the Senate will be federal representation, but rather being represented based off of your locale, you get represented based off your expertise or your competency, your specific categories of competency that you can kind of enter into based off meeting some like minimal threshold in that category. So for example, one category might be teachers. So if you're working as a teacher, or you have a degree that makes you a teacher, or you pass some like minimum requirement test that like shows you're qualified as a teacher, then you can enter into that category of competency, and like you vote. You can vote on specific issues related to that. You can also elect like federal representation in that specific category. So it might be like a teacher that everyone admires. All teachers admire this one teacher. They think they've done a really good job. They have like a stellar career. They think that they have a good idea of like what policies impact teaching in certain ways. So they elect that representative to represent them, So that would be like the new senator, but instead of being like the senator from South Carolina, they're like the teacher's senator. And it represents the whole U.S. rather than like a specific area, And then you can break those categories down into any number of categories. You can do 100 because that's how many senators are, but the number is sort of arbitrary. You can kind of pick whatever number makes sense, And then you can kind of look at the country and you look at the economy and you can say like, okay, like what best represents the people in terms of their like industry or like their expertise, and like how do we create sort of a committee, which is kind of like what the Senate is, sort of. How do you create a committee of experts that's responsible to the people, that's self-elected by the people in their specific area? So like if I'm not a teacher, I don't get to vote for the teacher. I get to vote maybe in some category related to energy and the environment instead, because I have some proven competency in those categories, And there's lots of hurdles and stuff and things that have to get figured out, but I think it could be a pretty effective way to do something different than what the House is already doing,
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a general idea that I've been kicking around for a little while. I call it the new Senate. I don't have a better name for it. You know.
Okay.
And you can make up all sorts of rules too. Like, for example, there might be like some key categories where like you're automatically enrolled into a category when you turn 18, for example. So you automatically get like one senator, one federal representative in the Senate upon your 18th birthday. You know, you almost call it like category 0 or something, like almost like the default one everyone's kind of able to participate in. You know, and then there might be like a second one that's like upon receiving your high school graduation or GED or equivalent, you know? So like you've passed some like base level education that you know kind of what's going on, at least at some base level, and then you kind of can participate in that. And then like all the ones after that are specifically tailored to like what you dedicated your life towards, you know? So it may take you 4 years to get a degree and start working as a teacher, and then once you do that, you're able to vote in that category, you know? And then maybe you set some like caps on like how many categories people could participate in. Maybe not. I don't know. But like 5 seems like a lot. You know, like I can't imagine too many people having more than 5 areas where they're like competent enough to know about things. You know, maybe not, but you can explore things like that. So like so that way like you reward people for having like multiple competencies. But also not punish people too badly for only having a couple, you know?
Right. Okay. Wow. You really put some thought into this. Obviously. And I don't mean to make you rehash it, you know.
No, it's cool.
You've probably like you said, you've gone over this a few times already in the podcast, so.
It's cool. Yeah. It's fun to kind of go over it every time. I feel like I describe it a little differently each time, and, you know.
Yeah. It'd be very interesting to go back and be like, how did I describe it the first time? Oh, that was completely different than when I said 2 months later, you know?
Yeah. So that's what I talk about a lot. The other couple that come to mind are ranked choice voting. I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting. I think that's just a better way to make decisions through ranked choice. And also getting rid of the electoral college is another thing I've talked a lot about on here. That's kind of, obviously it only kind of comes around when doing presidential elections, but I feel like mathematically it's not a good way to do things. I feel like the winner all in states is kind of like not ideal. It's obviously backfired a number of times now, like 3 times in the past like 6 elections where somebody won the popular vote but didn't win the electoral college vote and therefore lost the election. Like that seems stupid. Like why are we doing that? I don't know, you know? And
yeah,
to some extent, like the argument behind those things is like it gives like smaller states more power, you know? Like, I don't have any like allegiance to small states. Like I'm not here to like, that's not like my goal to like give small states power. My goal is to like do a better job, you know, to like, I don't know.
Okay. I'm sensing a little Iron Man in you, is what it sounds like. Yeah, doing things right versus doing. Well, I guess more like the social aspect of it versus like the individual aspect. If you were to think states were like individuals, right?
I'm glad you're catching on to the Iron Man thing. I like that. That's good, right?
Yeah, I guess it's the social aspect of it. You said there's the ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not too familiar with
all right. So I can kind of give you a quick like rundown of how it would work. Let's say you and I are we're running for the same office. Let's say it's mayor of Oklahoma City, for example.
All right.
And we're both running, and Oklahoma City has instituted ranked choice voting. Okay, so a couple of things work out in our favor, especially if we have similar platforms. Let's say like you put my platform, like the bullets of my platform and the bullets of your platform up next to each other, and they're like 90% the same. Like we both kind of want the same things. We're both kind of for the same things. So we're pretty similar, you know? So like if we go to vote and we don't have ranked choice voting, then like the people who like you and people like me have to split their vote, you know? And that's not ideal because they like us both and they would love either of us to win, but they ultimately have to pick one, you know?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Instead, with ranked choice voting, like the people who like you most can list you first and list me second, you know?
Ah, okay.
And therefore, when the votes are counted, if like, for example, if you weren't in like the top, I think it's like 2 or 3 vote getters, then like we would look to see like who the people who voted for you voted for second. And we would assign their vote to their second choice instead. So we pull that votes over and assign them to somebody else, you know? So that does a couple of things. One, it helps us run like a joint campaign. We can actually combine we can run like a commercial together. We can like co-fund the commercial or, you know, advertisement to like vote for me, or if you, you know, also vote for Johnny as your second choice. And you can basically say the same thing in reverse, you know? And it would kind of force us to focus on the things we have in common rather than the things that we disagree on. And we can maybe get more done that way because like we're focusing on where we agree, and it's a lot easier to get consensus around the things where people agree, where the divisive issues separate candidates, but it's hard to get progress when there's not consensus either, you know? So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I know that one issue, you know, in relation to like today's elections or today is one big concern is electability. You know, I've heard several testimonies where people say, oh, you know, I decided to vote for Biden instead of Sanders because I feel like Biden has better electability. He's more likely to get elected than Sanders himself. You know, and it's just like damn, it sucks that you have to choose. You know, they're both really strong candidates in their own regards, but the fact that you have these people split the vote it sucks. And I agree with your, you know, being able to work together on a common platform, because whenever I hear, you know, people are, you know, vying for the Democratic nomination, it's like everyone's attacking everyone's weak points, you know, and then you're just adding fuel to the fires for when you finally get to the primaries. It's like, hey, remember these things about this person? Don't forget that.
Yeah.
And then it's just like it works. It kind of works against, you know, the party the people who are in that party. So to have that ranked choice, it would cover that weakness, I guess you could say.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Thanks for that.
I think in general too, like I'm for policies that are nonpartisan. Like any sort of policy that we can implement that like stops stacking the deck for the 2 main political parties, I think are good, because I think the fact that we only have 2 main political parties and the fact that they have so much control over everything, I think it's leading to a lot of problems. And they've been in control for so long that they've structured kind of the rules to make it difficult for them to lose their grip, you know? And things like ranked choice voting, I think, would help loosen that grip a little bit.
Yeah. Are there any other countries that use ranked choice voting that I'm aware of?
Yeah, there's some places in the U.S. that use it. I believe Maine uses it. I believe the city of Berkeley uses it. I believe that it's being rolled out in different places to different effects. Honestly, should be more research on like where it's working, but you know, mostly I just look at it as like intuitively it makes sense to me as like a superior model. You know, whether that's true or not, I guess we'll have to look at the data and see how those areas are doing. You know.
Yeah. And I know there are other countries where their voting style is a lot different because they have multiple parties. And so when multiple parties run a platform, it's the top 2 or 3 that can create a majority, that capture the majority vote, would combine their parties, I guess, to create a government. I can't recall which countries do that, but it's another.
There's a number of countries that do something like that in Europe.
In Europe, yeah.
Yeah, certain parties get a certain amount of support, and then you kind of get a proportional amount of representation in government based off the amount of support you get in the election. And then those parties can kind of form coalitions to make majorities, and then once you have a majority, you can enact policy.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, yeah. One of the perks of traveling is learning about, you know, things like that. Which I otherwise would not have learned if I didn't go to that country and talk to those people. So,
yeah. All right, you want to shift gears to talking about like ourselves as individuals and sort of like pros and cons of different personality types and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure, man. I'd love to.
Okay, so I think like we can ask like these same sorts of questions about like how do we change society to like how do we change ourselves, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's challenging. So like if you could change something about yourself, what would you change? Start with that question. I know it's kind of might be a tough question, but
I'm I'm learning to be more courageous. To be more my for majority of my life, I've always been like the person who's quiet or who would say things that I know would put me in a bad situation. You know, not voicing my opinions on certain things, and this maybe you could call it my conflict aversion has definitely impacted me in a lot of ways. None of which I regret, but knowing that if I had said this one thing or um, I shouldn't have let that person do that to me is something that weighs on my mind a lot. Really, is it's just like I can't really pinpoint where that comes from, but the fact that I've always avoided, I tried to avoid conflict growing up. Maybe it comes from my religious background. I'm Buddhist, and conflict is something that I just never got involved in, you know. And I grew up with friends who like get into fights, and um, it's just like I don't ever. I've gotten to a couple of scraps. Um, haven't won a fight yet, so but yeah, it's just I feel like that growing up has affected me in a more professional sense and being courageous to create courageous in the sense of like taking bigger risks, saying the things that need to be said sooner than later, you know, things like that. So that's something that I've been trying to like. I wouldn't say it's the same as trying to step out of my comfort zone because I've definitely done that a lot. But it's when it comes to conflicts, I just can't. It's hard for me to navigate uh, those situations, you
totally,
know.
totally,
And that's something that I definitely am trying to work on.
yeah.
Yeah.
So something I want to kind of acknowledge here because it's kind of funny. Like the answer that you said is almost like the opposite for me. Like I need to cool it on my conflict, and my courageous conflict and saying what's on my mind. I might need to dial it down a little bit, but it's kind of, I think it's like points to kind of an irony here that like our greatest strengths can simultaneously be our greatest weaknesses. Like the fact
Mm,
that you might be a little bit more soft spoken has actually led to some benefits in your life that maybe you don't even realize. We're like, just to kind of like, in my experience, like being outspoken and being courageously outspoken and confrontational has led to like a lot of positive outcomes. Like people know they can rely on me to like tell them what I think. Like they know I'm going to do that, and they know that's good, especially like in certain roles in like business or friendship or relationships. Like that's good to have somebody like that. But it also could be bad too if not used correctly. If like that same sort of positive attribute can be negative if I'm like creating conflict in areas where like I don't need to be creating conflict, or like it doesn't actually benefit me to create the conflict there, or like the person doesn't know me enough to trust me, so therefore it just kind of like falls on deaf ears or makes me look like kind of an asshole or whatever. And it's like it could be, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
hmm
um, yeah, so it's kind of interesting how that works out. So like for me, it'd probably be like patience and hardworking would probably be the things where if I could change something about me, it'd be to have more patience, to be more hardworking. You
to
know?
to have to okay. Elaborate on that. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and like again, it's a double-edged sword here, right? Because like my lack of patience sometimes like pushes things forward. Like I'm like, all right, well, like let's move this forward. Like let's see where this goes, and like chop. Let's see what happens here. And like it could be,
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing by itself. But again, it could be negative. If it's like if I'm not letting people like come to their own conclusions, and I'm like pushing everything forward because I've already arrived at my conclusion. That's could be detrimental. And like being hardworking too. Like it's kind of like the benefit there is like I'm resourceful and like I'm more likely to be one of those people that work smart rather than work hard. You know.
Mm.
So it's like I see opportunities that where I like, oh, I can do this and like be successful in this without like killing myself, like working my ass off every day and like still be successful in the way that I want to be successful, you know? But it also sometimes when you do need to buckle down and like do something, like there's no shortcuts here. There's nothing here that's going to get you to the finish line any quicker. Like I struggle in some of those kind of environments sometimes, you know? So because I'm always trying to figure out, like, well, how can I shortcut this and outsmart this thing? And it's like sometimes you can't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. How it can be a double-edged sword. I guess for me, it's like whenever I think about avoiding conflict, I think about the times where I did get into conflicts and I did have to speak up and I had to say something, you know. And I could think of times when I've been confrontational to the point where I'll maybe win the situation, not really, like win the situation, like I feel good about myself, but then I always find myself like shortly afterwards regretting it or like feeling bad, like, oh man, I probably said something I shouldn't have. That person probably feels bad, and I just think, oh man, I definitely there was a better way to phrase that, and I didn't do it right, and now it's like it's gonna backfire, you know. And so I guess I think about like the repercussions of me having an aggressive attitude and then coming back to like bite me in the ass, you know. And maybe that's why I try to keep everything, you know, copacetic, you know, because I don't want to, you know, create any tension or have to worry about someone getting revenge on me or, you know, oh yeah, Johnny, he said this to me, so I'm gonna say this about him to other people and this, that, and the other, you know. So maybe that's what kind of drives, because I'm trying to keep everything. Maybe that's what drives my aversion to conflict, because I think about, I just feel bad afterwards, maybe, and it's just because I could have said things better, you know. And I guess the good thing is that when I'm in like meetings or when I was employed and I'd be in meetings where we talk about solutions to a problem, you know, I could talk about solutions to a problem, but sometimes if people are talking about things that that already solve the problem that I was going to present, I just kind of keep to myself, you know. So because I don't speak my mind all the time, it gives me, I guess, a chance to listen and to just like kind of absorb what others are saying. So that itself has been the good side of it. You know, like you said, by not always like speaking my mind, I get a chance to like what are other people saying, you know?
Right.
And I worked with this one guy back at my old job. He was like a 65-year-old OG, you know. And after a meeting, we left, and he came up to me. He's like, Johnny, you know, you're like a sponge, you know. You just sit there and you just like listen to everyone. You just like absorb information. And I was like, oh, thanks, Roger, appreciate that. And whenever like something comes up and you don't say anything unless someone says something that goes against what you know. And I was like, at first I was like, oh, thank you. But then I was like, oh, this guy's really paying attention to who I am as a person. You know, it's like, do I want that kind of attention? I don't know. It's like, yeah, you know, Johnny, if someone says we're going to do A, you're like, cool. You stay quiet. You don't say anything. But someone's like, we got to do B, and you're like, B's not going to work. You'll say something about it. I noticed it about you. And I was like, oh, okay. Interesting, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, there are some pros and cons to that.
Yeah. And it's about, ultimately comes down to having a good balance with it, you know?
I think my greatest strength though is my another thing that I value is growth, which kind of works with knowledge, because I'm always like thinking of ways of how can I be better, you know. And I'm always trying to grow like spiritually, mentally, you know, intellectually, reading a lot of books and stuff. And I think that's what really drives my behaviors, is wanting to know what others are wanting to know just anything, I guess, you know, that comes up.
I have some good theories on this, and we're gonna get to this later. I'm gonna come back to this point because I think it's like I think I got you figured out with a certain thing. But I wanna talk about Myers-Briggs before we get into that.
Okay, yeah.
As a teaser, I want to talk about Harry Potter and I want to talk about Hogwarts houses. But first, let's talk about Myers-Briggs.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
You're familiar with Myers-Briggs at all? Like personality tests? Do you know what your kind of category is or whatever? Like what
I
you're.
think so. Yeah, I've taken the quiz a few times over the years. You know, every now and again I'll take it, not the actual version, but like an offshoot of it,
Sure.
just kind of like a gut check of who I am. And let's see if I think I have it saved in like one of my notes. I think if I remember correctly, I am a ENSJ, but that last one can change between the J and the other one.
J and P, I think.
Is it P? Yeah, that one always changes, but the first three are pretty more or less set in stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
ENSJ.
yeah, and I think that's like extrovert.
Yep.
Intuitive.
Judging.
What's the last? What's the S?
Sensing.
Stancing.
Sensing. I think that's right. Versus thinking. Sensing versus thinking.
Okay. Sensing. Oh, sensing. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, it's interesting to like look at these, right? So like I'm an ENTJ, So when you look up ENTJ, it's called the commander, the commander type. And it's three words that they use: bold, imaginative, and strong-willed, And like you can see how any of those could be positive if used correctly, Like bold, like when bold action is required, it's great. I'm great to have around because I'm not afraid to like take that bold action, But it's also like, oh, this kid's kind of bold, isn't he? He's kind of like, who the fuck do you think he is? Kind of like, I kind of can come off as that vibe too, So I kind of got to be careful with that because it comes back to the double-edged sword thing, or like imaginative. It's like that's great when you're trying to envision like how things could be. Like we're talking about with the political thing. I'm trying to like challenge people's imagination to like question how things could be, But that's not very effective for dealing with like how things are, especially if they're like stagnant and like difficult to change. My imagination of like what they could be doesn't really get me to like dealing with how it is, And then the last one too of like strong-willed, like sure, when there's like a challenge that needs to be overcome, it's kind of great to have somebody who's strong-willed there to work on your side, especially when it can be overcome, But when sometimes you're like trying to fight a losing battle and you're dealing with somebody who's strong-willed, it's like, oh, they're just going to burn everybody out, That's like if they refuse to yield, So it's kind of interesting how they could all be pros and cons at the same time,
Oh, okay. I'm so glad you said that because when you said commander, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I think I know this, and so I went to my my email address to find the test results, and this one that I took, the most recent one, which was a couple years ago actually, it also says commander. It's through 16 personalities. If you remember that, maybe not, you don't remember that, but
same thing because it's there's four categories and there's 2 options in each category, so it's like 2 raised to the 4 is 16,
Yeah, there you go. And it's the commander, extroverted, intuitive, thinking, judging. This one has turbulence. We're the same, bro.
We're the same, bro.
Maybe I would put my money that more than 50% of the people in ESW are probably ENTJs.
Yeah, and it changes too based off of like your mood and kind of how you changed over the years. Like last time I took it was several years ago, so I could be something else for all I know. But like I think the point is like it highlights your strengths, right? And like figuring out how to use your strengths, but not letting them simultaneously be your weaknesses. It's tricky.
Yeah.
Balance. Like being the commander type, it's like that's great. Like when you need a commander, But if like nobody's looking for a commander, it's like who's this guy trying to command everything? It's like it doesn't. It can be kind of it's kind of.
And so the second book that I read, so this whole like I started to avidly read around 2017, 2016. The first book I ever read that I started to value like the knowledge from books was the life-changing magic of tidying up. The second book I read though was StrengthsFinder 2.0. A friend had loaned it to me to read when I was on my way to my first interview, and it raised some really good points about a person's strengths and their weaknesses, and it made me think more about it because I had never really thought about it before, and then that's what inspired me to take this test. But I think that in line with what the book says, I think that focusing more on your strengths will give you. It's more efficient. It's the smarter way to, I think, succeed in life than to worry about covering your weaknesses. Because, I mean, when you play to your strengths, everything just kind of, it's more likely to fall in place.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. And it makes sense, like from kind of an economic perspective too, right? Because whatever job you're going to get, whatever job you're going to be most successful in, let's say, and be most rewarding, or however you want to define it, is probably going to be one where you leverage your strengths, you know? Mm-hmm. So if you want to improve your strengths, it's probably a good way to kind of move your career forward more rapidly, you know, or get where you want to get where you want to go more quickly, you know? Whereas kind of shoring up your weaknesses maybe can like develop you more as a well-rounded person, but less as like a standout in any specific way, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one good example the book gave was actually the this football player who, you know, intrinsically he wasn't very talented, but he was able to make like the second or third stringer of the football team. And when he finally got a chance to play, man, did he shine. He scored like the winning touchdown for the team when you really needed it. But how long is a football game normally? A high school football game, like an hour? Or something like that?
Yeah, I think pros is 4 15-minute quarters, so high school is probably the same, but it could be 4 12-minute quarters. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah. So in summary, the 2 minutes he ended up getting to play out of the entire time he didn't play, he was able to show his skill, but that was like chance. You know, he didn't. Basically, he wasn't talented enough to be first stringer, and when he finally did play, he did well, but he had to wait like the entire game to finally show it, to finally do it. So playing to your strengths, it will definitely get you further, I think, than trying to. And so basically, I guess what this is saying is that football is not his greatest strength, and he should probably do something else. And I think he eventually did. He became like a doctor or a professor or something like that.
Yeah.
So. Or another example, Michael Jordan. I mean, that dude's amazing basketball player. Play to your strengths. Don't play baseball, you know.
Did you watch the new docuseries there, Last Dance?
No, I haven't yet. No.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I wasn't named after Michael Jordan by any means, but it's pretty cool to have the namesake anyway, you know. He's a pretty cool guy, I think.
Yeah.
And I see myself in sometimes too, like when he's talking about like teammates, like some of them not liking him because he like really like pushes everybody to be great, you know? And like I get in trouble for that too sometimes, like because I know people could do better, you know? I know I could do better. So like I'm pretty critical, you know? And so sometimes people don't want to be criticized, you know? It's like it's too much to handle sometimes, you know? But it's like, but those teams don't win 6 championships if he's not like demanding more from his teammates, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Is that that The Last Dance only about? Is it mainly about like Michael Jordan, or is it about the Bulls in total, the team?
It's mainly about Michael Jordan, but it talks about the team in general. It focuses on the Last Dance, which was the year of 1998 when they won their 6th title, kind of like their last time that the team was together. But it's like a series of flashbacks throughout Michael's life and throughout Michael's college career and early career with the Bulls, as well as like their other 5 championships. So it kind of like merges together like the present, quote unquote present of 1998 with like the past, like jumping to all these different timelines, kind of like working up till like they're the same timeline, you know? They did it. Pretty cool story.
Okay. I'm going to watch it tonight, most likely, because I've been seeing like memes on it pop up and like, yeah, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to watch that, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of things in there that I didn't know. A bunch that I did know, but it was cool to kind of see it all and see the interviews and see people talk about them and stuff. So pretty rocking.
Yeah.
All right, so back to this personality thing.
Okay. Yeah.
I teased before. So about Harry Potter. How familiar are you with the wizarding world of Harry Potter and specifically the Hogwarts houses?
I know the names of the Hogwarts houses, and I've seen all the movies.
Do you know what Hogwarts house you're in? Don't tell me which one you're in, but do you know which one you're in, or do you think you know which one you're in?
No, no clue. I've got like a general idea of the different personalities. One's like more sensing, and one's more like thinking, and one's more leadership based. And the other one's more I actually don't know what that one's about.
Huh.
Slytherin? What's Slytherin about? Anyways, I think you'll tell me. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. So,
Okay.
based off the answers to your questions before, when I asked you kind of what would you change about yourself, and then we also highlighted your strength. You said you wanted to be more courageous and more willing to like engage in conflict. And that like your strengths are like that growth mindset and that like that you really value knowledge. And to me that screams Ravenclaw. That tells me you're Ravenclaw based off those answers. I think that overlaps with that pretty well. And I have a couple reasons for why I think that's the case, but okay, so where do I want to start here? So there's 4 houses, okay? And when they're laid out on the Hogwarts crest, I think they laid them out like purposefully in like a circle, So you have like one's opposite of the other. So like I think you're a Ravenclaw, and like the opposite of Ravenclaw is Gryffindor.
Okay.
And Gryffindors are the courageous ones, the ones that you're saying that you really want to be able to have that trait, but you feel like sometimes you're lacking in that trait. But like the fact that you value knowledge is like the most valuable thing to you is like similarly to like how Ravenclaws operate. Like they value knowledge, So first of all, I want to say that I think J.K. Rowling is a genius. I think she's, so I also think that there's kind of like a natural order to these houses, right? And like a progression almost of how you should almost work through things, that she's kind of like trying to tell us like subtly. She doesn't like explicitly say it, but it's like hidden in the colors, So like the Hufflepuff is yellow and black. Let's focus on the black part for right now. It's like foundational. It's like the basics, It's like, and it's representative of like wisdom and like what is right, and then the next 3 kind of work in like a progression of like the Olympic medals. So you have like bronze, and then you have silver, and then you have gold, and then it comes back in the circle back to black, And I think I think it kind of works in this circle like for a reason, because like probably the most important thing you could do is like have a good moral compass and be hardworking, and that's like characteristic of the Hufflepuff, It's like foundational. And that's like the humble badger. They're symbolized by the badger,
okay.
And then it's forward to the Ravenclaw, which is symbolized by the eagle, and that's like wit and like knowledge and like understanding like what's possible. And like you can picture like too like the animal that represents it, kind of like the eagle is like literally above everything, like it can see everything, it knows like all of the possibilities, and then it steps forward to the Slytherin, which is represented by silver and green, so we're kind of working up the Olympic ladder here, and that's like ambition. So like what do we desire most, like what is our greatest ambition, So it's like it's one thing to be like hardworking like the humble badger, but then like the next step is like have some vision, have some knowledge, like be able to see what your options are, so then you can ultimately take the next step to the Slytherin of like having an ambition to like pick out of all of the options that you could do, to have the ambition to pick one thing and like focus on that one thing is like the Slytherin element, And what the Slytherins do is that they sacrifice everything for that one thing, because by kind of selecting that one thing, you therefore have to give everything else up kind of indirectly,
Okay. All right.
The final one is the Gryffindor, which is like the heroes of the story. Like Harry Potter's a Gryffindor, so they're like the heroes, and they're represented by gold and red. So it's like the highest value. So like when you've set your, you've been hardworking, you have a good moral compass, you see the field, you pick one thing and you go after it, right? And you sacrifice everything for that one thing. Well, what's the last thing you have to sacrifice?
Yourself.
Exactly. Exactly right, and that's what the hero does in the story, and that's what all great heroes do. It's not enough to like sacrifice everything to the goal and like leave yourself out of it. Like you still have to put yourself on the line, especially if what you're doing is like true and good and you evaluated all your options. So it's like kind of like works in a cycle in that way, like I think working in them that order kind of leads to the best outcomes, And another thing I think is really interesting with this is on the crest, like on the Hogwarts crest, it has this phrase in Latin, and I forget what the phrase is in Latin, but it translates to never tickle a sleeping dragon. Okay?
Okay, got it.
So it's like, what the hell is this? Like, why is this on the crest? Like, well, this doesn't even make any sense, you know? But then, like, I was looking at all the animals. You got the badger, you got the eagle, you got the snake, and you got the lion, you know? And if you take all these creatures and you kind of combine, like, the best traits of them all into one creature, you get a dragon.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Like, body of the badger and, like, the wings of the eagle and, like the venom and like the skin of the snake and like the head of a lion, you know, all kind of in one creature. And like, I think what she's trying to tell us there, and like subtly, is that like I'm a Slytherin, for example, you know, so there's pros and cons of being a Slytherin. The opposite is a Hufflepuff, and it relates to what I was saying before about like wishing I was more hardworking and stuff, you know. But anyway. What she's trying to tell us there is like integrate all of these things into one and you're unstoppable, you know? And because like you can beat a lion, like it's going to be hard. Like you can beat a badger, it's going to be hard. Like they can beat each other even, you know? But like nobody can beat a dragon. They're unstoppable, you know? They're hardworking, they see the field, they're ambitious enough to pick a goal, and they're courageous enough to lay themselves on the line for that goal. You know, it's like good luck beating a dragon. It's like you're not going to do it, you know? So yeah, that's my theory on the Harry Potter Hogwarts houses and how it relates to personality types. And, you know, ultimately it's like, how do we find a way to integrate the best of all of these traits into one, you know? And sometimes it's hard to do it as a person. Sometimes you got to do it as a team, you know? And I think some of the best partnerships, whether in business or relationships wise, like complement each other in that way, you know?
I agree. Well, it kind of goes back to the Last Dance a little bit. You know how you had Michael Jordan, but you still had a team. You know, you had Karen Brady. What else is his name? Charles Barkley, was he? He was. No, I don't know.
No, Scottie Pippen was like his main running mate there. He was kind of like his main guy, and then you also had Dennis Rodman for a number of years. That was like kind of their big three there for a number of years.
Okay. Yeah, like the strength of the team.
Totally.
Resolve. Like that. It was.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of. Let's see. Just at this. I think last. What was it? Okay. So the way it's organized on the crest, it's like you start at Hufflepuff and then you kind of move your way up to Gryffindor. But then how do you go when you go from Gryffindor to Hufflepuff? How does that? What do you think connects those two going back? You know, in the circle.
Yeah, good question. To me, it's like the cycle is sort of complete and it's time to start a new cycle. Kind of like the fractal again. You know, it's like, okay, so we've taken this path around like being hardworking and humble in the beginning and trying to figure it out, and then like zooming out a little bit to like see the field, right? And then like being ambitious enough and soul focused enough to pick one thing and going after it, and then like laying yourself on the line. It's like, okay, now you did it. It's over. You've won the gold medal, let's say. So like now you got to start all over again. You got to go back to being a humble badger. You got to go back to like being hardworking and checking in on your moral compass and making sure everything's good there, and then like zooming out again as the eagle and like checking out the field, seeing what's available to you, seeing what's possible, you know? So it like starts the cycle over again. I think that's kind of how I view it anyway, you know?
Oh, okay. The colors for Ravenclaw, did you say bronze?
Yeah, bronze is their like metal color, and then blue is their other color.
Oh, bronze. Okay, wow. So there's bronze, silver, and gold. Okay. And then you have Hufflepuff, which is like black and yellow, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. No, I didn't know. I wasn't familiar with this kind of setup, but I mean, now that you say it, it's really well thought out. Yeah. J.K. Rowling is. You think she was thinking all this as she was writing the books?
Probably. I don't know. Like I didn't like parts of this. I read places like, but the one thing that I think I came up with like somewhat independently is like the part about when you smash them all together, you get a dragon. I haven't heard anybody say that specifically, but it makes sense. Especially she gave you the little clue there, right on the crest of in the Latin phrase of like never tickle a sleeping dragon. It's like it's right there, you know.
Yeah.
But it's in Latin, so it's like not obvious. You have to translate it and think about it and like look at the animals and kind of be like, oh shit, like they are kind of like dragon-esque if you combine them all together. And I kind of became obsessed with Harry Potter when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail. We listened to it, like I had the one earbud in, and then my fiance, she wasn't my fiance at the time, like she had the other earbud in, and we hiked that way. And it was awesome because like I was like simultaneously studying like religious stories and like psychological interpretations of religious stories, and then you have the story of Harry Potter, which is kind of like a modern mythology sort of. Like they take J.K. Rowling takes a lot of these same concepts of like the hero and like self-sacrifice and love and truth and all these things, and she kind of builds it into this modern story of like this coming of age of this kid, you know, and like she did, you know, obviously it's super popular, so she must have done a great job, you know.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I can't think of anything that would be on par with the kind of lore and fame that that could compete with Harry Potter. To be honest, like, yeah, I think that as you're describing this, it reminded me of this book I had read last year. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth, and it's like she talks about what is the one trait that determines us from everyone else in whatever field that we excel at, and she determines that from her studies, grit is the common factor that puts us on that path to mastery. And it starts off there. She goes in a lot of details, a lot of good solid examples. There's some good parenting tips as well, but it starts off with like an interest, like building an interest in like different things and like seeing what like really appeals to you. And then once you find that thing that you're like, okay, like this is what I want to be, like this is what I really like, you derive a sense of joy from it. You start to practice it more. So the first thing is interest, the second thing is practice, and you practice and you practice and you keep doing it, until you like become, you can be recognized in that field of expertise that you chose. And then the last thing is mastery, is becoming like the best at it. And she says that, that thing that kind of guides you this entire time is just grit. And grit is like that perseverance to not stop, that's driven by your values or driven by joy, or that pushes you through that. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying about Harry Potter's, the different houses, where you start off somewhere, you get the basics, and then you kind of build that interest, and then you kind of focus on the one thing until you become the master at it, and then you kind of like start that over again.
Yep.
So it's really cool to see. That's why I love reading these different books. It's really cool to see like concepts being borrowed and used in other places. Like, oh yeah, I read that book. Oh yeah, I remember that what she talked about there. And
yeah. There's a saying that I learned on the trail that I really like that my friend Prometheus told me. Good artists take, great artists steal.
Good artists take, great artists steal.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if I can see farther, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of a giant, where it's like your work builds off the works of others. Is it kind of like?
It's like you know, because art is always going to build off previous art. Like art is always inspired by other forms of art, whether it's like music or whatever, But it's like, I'm trying to think of a good example, like that Wagon Wheel song or whatever, that like they didn't write that song. What's the name of that group?
Wagon Wheel?
Can't remember. Or like Led Zeppelin's a better example. Like Led Zeppelin, let's use them instead. Like, dude, they stole a lot of stuff from a lot of different people. Like they did. That's just like a known fact that like they ripped people off. But they also did it like so great that they made it their own. And it's like, well, now it's Led Zeppelin. So like whatever. Like you should have did it as good as, you know what I mean? Like it's like almost like you put your own stamp on something, even though it's like you're taking it from other things. Like you make it your own in a way that's like unique to you and will stand forever in that way, even though like it's inevitable that you've borrowed from other people, So
then who are the people the good artists that take, what are they taking?
Like influence, they're being influenced. But they're not, it's almost like they're like, they're being influenced, but they're not like making it their own, Like when you steal something, you make it your own.
Okay. Yeah. I see that. And then when you take, you take it, but you don't make it your own. I see.
It's still kind of there, sort of,
It's like I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. I always knew the song as the song by Whitney Houston in the movie The Bodyguard. But then, like, years later, I learned that it was actually a cover of Dolly Parton's version of I Will Always Love You.
Exactly. It's exactly.
And even though
it's used with Wagon Wheel, but I couldn't remember the name of the band off the top of my head. It's exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah. Or my personal favorite, I'd be remiss if I was like on a podcast I didn't mention Kanye West, like one of my favorite artists of all time, sampling genius.
Yes.
It's
love Kanye.
Right?
Love him, dude. He's like, it makes me so happy that people like him even exist. The fact that he's out there doing his thing and being a weirdo and like making art, and dude, I just love it. It's like he just strikes so many chords with me, like personally. Like, and I forget what album it is. I think it's Yay. It starts off and he's like, people say don't say this, don't say that, just say it out loud, see how it feels. I'm like, dude, yes. Exactly. Like who cares? Like, just say it. Like, what's gonna happen?
Say it out loud. See
how it feels. Dude, I love him. Dude, he's one of my favorite artists. Like, I'm talking about making like a hero board. Like, because there's so many people that I've so much inspiration from in my life, and like I want to create like a visual like representation of that, and I think a hero board would be a really cool way to do that. And Kanye West would 100% be on the hero board.
Be on the board? Damn, that's good. Oh, I like that. Same here. Kanye West would definitely be on. Yeah, he's definitely a huge influence. And I love hearing his earlier stuff where he talks about like his work ethic. He's like, who puts out 3 beats a day every all summer, every summer for 5 years or for 3 years, something like that. And it's like, damn, can you imagine making 3 beats every day all summer for 5 years? Like, holy smokes, that's crazy. It's
the amount of work that people put in to rise to the level that they rise to is like unreal.
Yeah. Let's talk about like mastery and like, get into one thing. You said you're a Slytherin, right? So what's the one thing that you really want to focus on right now?
Yeah, so my strengths, the strengths of Slytherin, which I relate to, are like ambition, like, and kind of resourcefulness, and kind of being a little bit calculated, and you can almost picture the snake, like the snake doesn't do, kind of chills until it's ready to strike, and it's like, bam, that's what I wanted, I went and got it. Like, that's kind of like how I kind of roll,
Okay.
Well, like the opposite of it is the badger, the humble badger. So when it comes to like just like prodding along and like doing like the same kind of boring work like over and over again, I'm like, Jesus, like, really gonna make me do all that? Like, I don't, like, it's like, like, seriously, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do that. But like, if I want to be a dragon, which is what everybody should want to be, like, that's what I have to do most, because I already have enough ambition and enough resourcefulness and enough like of those traits to carry me forward, right? But if I can build up some of those weaker areas and like find a way to be more hardworking, to be more humble, to be more diligent in my approach to things, like, I can do anything, anything I put my mind to, and then you kind of have the categories on the other side of the Slytherin, like kind of like not the opposite, but like the adjacent ones, let's say, of like the Gryffindor and the Ravenclaw, which are like the ones I said that I think you're probably Ravenclaw and your opposite's probably Gryffindor. Like, I have some of those traits, like when it comes to like being able to be like Ravenclaw and be like, have some wit and like see the field and like know what's available to me. Like, I can do that reasonably well, other than like having the courage of like the lion of the Gryffindor and like to be brave. Like, I can do that reasonably well. Like, it's not like those are my weak areas. They're kind of like my neutral areas, So yeah. And Slytherins are the bad guys in the stories. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they're obviously like.
No, yeah, I definitely know that much about it. Yeah.
And so, kind of reflecting on that, the thing that I think you have to be careful of as a Slytherin is like, because they're very ambitious, so they have like goal and they sacrifice for the goal. So like the thing I got to be really careful of is like, make sure that my goal is like a good goal, You know, because if it's not, I'm gonna like do everything for the wrong goal, and that's a bad move. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
then similarly, like being cognizant of like what I'm sacrificing for the goal, you know, and making sure that I'm not sacrificing the wrong things even for the right goal, you know, like because I can be blinded for the goal and try to take shortcuts or like, you know, whatever, and it's like you don't want to do too much of that either, you know. Some of it's necessary, you know, but you don't want to do too much of it either, you know.
Yeah.
Like for example, you don't want to sacrifice other people for your goal. Like you want
Right.
to sacrifice other things, maybe, and like other things that are taking away some of your time, and some of those things might be people, you know, but you don't want to like put anything, you know, sacrifice anything that doesn't need to be sacrificed for that goal, you know, that's not related to it or like whatever, you know.
Right. That's. I think you're on the right track. It sounds like to me you're on the right track at least, because I know because there's a yeah, like you shouldn't use other people as a means to an end. You know, they should be the end. Um, I read this book called by Mark Manson. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. All right, and great book by the way. I highly recommend it. I like
What's the name again?
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
And his name is what?
Mark Manson.
Mark Manson.
I love his writing style. It's very easy to understand, and he just like he seriously doesn't give a fuck about writing like the book. He's just but like the concepts that he drives home are really useful, and I'd say they've had a big impact on me.
Like what? Can you tell me some of the things?
Like so during this podcast, I've been talking a lot about like values, and values are what drives you. And one thing he talks about is like what are good values and what are bad values. And he talks about the characteristics of what kind of values you should have. But one thing that I want to refer to in your situation, which I think you are on the right track for sure, is that he gives an example. This is an example that I'll never forget because it's really good. It's like he's like, okay, me and my wife, I clean the house because I love my wife. That's a good way to think about it. You know, and she's like the end. She's not the means. She's the end, and he values the relationship he has with her. So an example of a bad value is he's like, okay, I clean the house because I want to have sex with my wife, or something like that. Or I clean the house to make my wife happy so that she'll give me sex. There you go. It's like that, and it's like that's bad because your wife is now the means to the end, which is sex. You just want sex, and that's why you did that for her. So that's a bad path to take, you know. And so when you say, you know, you don't want to sacrifice the wrong thing, like people, that's what that reminded me of. Was that example you gave? Like
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, the book itself is pretty short, and he gives a lot of good personal examples, and he also references a lot of like research and a lot of experiments to kind of support some of his thoughts on just life in general. Like it's a philosophical book disguised as a everyday conversation. Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So we're kind of approaching our last 5 minutes of our 2-hour mark here. So I had a couple questions here that I wanted to close with, and I don't think I can hit all of them. So I'm just going to pick one. What do you miss most about the pre-COVID-19 days? Like, what are you looking forward to most coming back, or like, what do you miss most about those days? Because it feels like ages ago since like we've been able to just like fist bump somebody or like, you know, hang out at a party and, you know what I mean, like any of that stuff, you know. So what do you miss most about it?
It's that I miss like human interaction a lot, seeing a lot of people face to face. So I'd say two things: traveling and being able to be around a lot of people at once. Because as an extrovert, like it just gives me energy. Totally. And and actually last night I had a dream about traveling, and I was like, wow, like I really miss it, you know.
Where were you traveling in your dream? Do you remember?
I went to Los Angeles actually. It's crazy. I went to Los Angeles with a couple of my buddies, my girlfriend, and stayed in the hostel and met some people there, and like hung out, and it was like cool and something that I couldn't do right now if I wanted to.
Yeah.
So
Do you dream a lot? Are you like a pretty active dreamer, or is that kind of rare for you?
recently I have been, like last night and the night before, I've been dreaming more vividly for the past 3 nights actually. But yeah, I'm not sure what changed, but before that I was just not sleeping well. I couldn't sleep and then stay asleep. I'd like wake up intermittently, and I wouldn't remember any of my dreams. But recently it's gotten a lot better.
Dreams are crazy, aren't they? I was listening to a podcast about them the other day that he kind of described them as like your brain kind of runs all these possible scenarios and like experiments with them. So like the dream can die and you don't have to. It's kind of like a biological like sort of a creation that we've come up with in our brains to like examine scenarios. I don't know if I explained that well. I only heard it once, so I don't think I nailed that right. But basically like in a dream, you put yourself in a scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see how it plays out, and that way, if you're ever in that scenario in real life, you kind of know how it plays out, or you at least have an idea of how it might play out. And it's like your brain's running all these like iterative examples to give you like a sense of things, And it also serves as this function of like sorting like chaos into order. Like it's like the chaos in your brain is trying to figure out what to do with it. And then like sometimes you can use a dream to like extract out like the more simple parts of it that you can put into order,
Oh, okay. Interesting. So is this probably why we experience like deja vu? Because like our minds are constantly putting us in different scenarios that probably haven't happened yet, but then when it does, you're kind of like, oh, I feel like I've been there before. Is it kind of maybe related to that?
Exactly. You've imagined this scenario already, and maybe you didn't imagine it exactly this way, but there's so many similarities between how you imagined it and how it is right now. They're like, damn, I feel like I've been here before. Like, what's going on here?
Huh. Do you have more information like who that person was, or where you heard this from?
About the dreams?
Yeah, the dreams. Yeah.
So it's actually I got it from a podcast from Dr. Jordan B. Peterson.
Ah, okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with him at all. I basically became obsessed with him and like listened to his podcast all the time, and I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot about like the psychological interpretations of religious stories. I've learned a lot about like taking responsibility as an individual. He's really like helped me a lot, kind of on a personal level, And
Yeah.
He gets a bad rap, I think, in the media sometimes. I think they kind of overemphasize some key things that he said or whatever, and I feel like it doesn't feel very authentic to me, So yeah, and I listen to the podcast a lot, and I've been listening to it at 2 times the speed. So that's been crazy because he already kind of talks fast, but now he like talks like twice as fast, and it's been fun to like let my brain kind of like get used to that, and I feel like it helps me like process things more quickly. It helps me like put my words together more quickly too. So it's been enjoyable to learn.
Holy smokes, dude! I haven't gotten to 2x. Usually when I listen to podcasts and audiobooks, I'm like 1.5x. I haven't really gotten to 2 yet. I've been trying to get to 2, but man, it's just so fast.
Yeah. I think part of it with him is like I've already listened to so many of his podcasts, and a lot of the times he's like going over similar ideas.
Oh, okay.
I'm already like exposed to the ideas, and rather he's just kind of elaborating in like different ways, and sometimes the exact same way, Because they're like lectures. There's like lecture series that he's doing that he's just recording and uploading as a podcast. So like, if you give a lecture on a certain topic, like there's going to be a lot of overlap,
I was listening to his book, The 12 Rules of Life.
Yeah.
I got like halfway through the book before I use this app called Libby to like rent library books and audiobooks. And I was listening to his book, but I didn't finish it before my rental period was up, so I have to wait for it again. But
that's cool. Libby, Libby.
Yeah. If you just get like a library card, you put the number in, and then you'll get like access to all their books, and you can like reserve it in advance or loan it out or whatever.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
That's how I get all of my books. Yeah. And then you get other people's library cards in other places, so that in case the book you're looking for isn't in your library, you can look in those other libraries.
And you can just download it right to your phone. You don't have to go anywhere, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Technology is pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I've got like a library book in like Houston, Texas, here in Oklahoma. I got one in Indianapolis from a friend who was there. So I've got different places to listen to things.
That's awesome. We're living
Yeah.
in times, don't we? There's some
Yeah.
bad things in the world, but most of it's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I think things are getting better, you know.
Yeah. Well, brother, we're at the 2-hour mark. It was great to talk with you. This is one of my favorite episodes so far. Truly a pleasure. Thanks for listening to me rant about Harry Potter and all this crazy stuff. It's been truly a pleasure.
No, same here, man. Thanks for having me on. I had a good time talking about just a lot of different things. Great to hear about your ideas on how you know our political system could be different, because I'm honestly not very familiar with it.
Yeah.
And I even though I haven't read any of the Harry Potter books, I always love hearing about the lore on it. So that was cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Keep in touch. Take care of yourself and have a good night.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. You too. And I'll talk to you again soon, man.
Keep it real. Take care.
You too, brother. Later.